Nightlife venues are being wiped out at record rates across the West, driven by factors like the ever-rising cost of living, changes in dating habits, a fear of social embarrassment and being recorded, as well as the uncomfortable and predatory nightlife environments that deter many from even participating.
Joey, stop! Joey, stop!
The past 2 years has seen the UK lose an average of 3 nightclubs and 6 pubs every week, with projections warning that most clubs could disappear entirely by 2030. What was once seen as a vibrant and essential part of social life is quickly becoming a thing of the past. But this isn't just about closures. It's about a complete shift in how businesses operate and how people socialize. The whole idea of going out is being reshaped into something more curated, filtered, and algorithm-driven, often planned through a screen. And when the business model no longer works, while the culture moves on, the collapse of the nightlife industry as we know it today isn't just a possibility, it's already happening. If we look back 30, 20, or even 10 years ago, the nightlife scene felt incredibly different. These eras were defined by packed dance floors, very few phones in sight, and effortless socializing, made easier by a time when grabbing a drink was a much more popular and affordable pastime. So what happened? One of the biggest shifts is purely economic, as inflation, rent, and the price of essentials have skyrocketed across the West. Much of the disposable income needed for a night out has largely vanished. This widespread dip in overall purchasing power has hit young people harder than virtually any other group. So let's break it down. When you factor in round-trip transport, club entry fees, a few rounds of drinks, and a late-night McDonald's, it becomes clear that a few hours of fun starts to look like a serious financial liability. And when we compare these rates to those of 20 years ago, we see that a similar night comes at a much higher price. Many people who want to go out more simply can't afford it. And even for those who can, the desire to do so is also disappearing for a number of reasons. One of which was caused by the COVID pandemic, a turning point the industry never fully recovered from. Lockdowns didn't just hurt or permanently destroy businesses, they broke the habit of going out altogether. People became accustomed to staying in, changing the way they spend their leisure time. Weekend nights out were replaced by doom-scrolling TikTok and Netflix binge-watching marathons. For many, those habits never fully reversed, but alongside rising costs and shifting social behaviors, there's another quieter and more significant trend reshaping nightlife. Young people are simply drinking less. Data from a variety of sources shows that more Gen Zs, particularly in the West, are choosing not to drink at all, while those who do are drinking less often. This seems to be fueled by a growing focus on health, fitness, and self-optimization. As gym culture, mental well-being, and performance become priorities, alcohol is now commonly perceived as something that disrupts sleep, energy, and overall progress. In a society now centered around looking, feeling, and functioning at your best, regularly getting drunk is starting to feel outdated. And without alcohol as the social glue, the entire foundation of nightlife starts to fall apart. Technology and social media changed everything in this evolving culture. You see, in the past, free time was often boring. Going to a bar, pub, or nightclub was one of the very few ways of meeting new friends and socializing. But now, with endless online platforms and entertainment at our fingertips, people can connect instantly and satisfy their social itch without ever having to leave the house. Which means nightlife is no longer the default. It's just one option among many. This decline in face-to-face interaction hasn't just changed the forming of friendships, it's completely transformed the way dating is approached.
As the Irish philosopher Ed Sheeran once put it, the club isn't the best place to find a lover, so the bar is where he goes. Except that would appear not to be true anymore because young people might not be as likely to go to either of those spots at all.
A particular graph went viral back in 2017, illustrating how couples had met each other over time. We can see that traditional and local ways of meeting a partner have declined, while the proportion of couples formed online has surged. However, this graph is significantly outdated. Newer insights show that as of 2026, over 50% of couples now meet from online dating apps, driven by over 360 million worldwide users. A staggering shift that shows finding love online is no longer the exception, but the norm. And in the wake of this digital takeover, what's left of in-person connection? If dating has already moved online, nightlife loses one of its main reasons to exist, with the traditional act of going out on the pool being increasingly seen as a relic. In fact, a range of surveys suggest that nearly half of young men actively avoid approaching women altogether due to the fear of being perceived as creepy, and more than half of Gen Z also say that the fear of rejection holds them back. And now, there's another fear, being filmed and publicly judged online. In an era where a single clip can be shared instantly, many young people are becoming self-conscious about how they're viewed in public spaces. For Gen Z in particular, the idea of dancing, letting loose, or even approaching someone now comes with the risk of being labeled cringe, and having that moment live online indefinitely. It's obvious that cameras have largely killed risk-taking and spontaneity. Nightlife used to be the marketplace for dating, but now, that marketplace is open 24/7 on your phone.
The one guy I know that's a big player in Miami, he said he never goes out anymore. There's no point. He just gets on Instagram and looks at his DMs there.
But the real story goes much deeper than just dating apps and social anxiety. The NTIA reports that safety concerns are creating nighttime deserts, pushing women towards house parties and private gatherings instead. Their research found that 63% of women have experienced inappropriate sexual behavior in nightlife spaces, often forcing them to carefully manage how they reject male advances, as to avoid aggressive or even violent escalation. And beyond harassment, groping, and inappropriate remarks, the threat of dangers like drink spiking has become a pervasive shadow over the dance floor, driving demand for protective measures like the nightcap, a drink-covering scrunchie designed to turn a fashion accessory into a potentially vital line of defense. Yet, this is just one of many risks women face in these environments. A few years ago, a phenomenon known as needle spiking became a major national flashpoint, starting in UK university towns before spreading more widely. The fear surrounding these kinds of incidents contributed to nationwide boycotts, reinforcing the idea that for many, a night out no longer feels safe. Collectively, these risks may help explain why fewer women are choosing to participate in traditional nightlife, widening the gender disparity within public venues.
I've noticed it used to be like where people would go to the club and they'll be happy to bring 10, 15 girls to the club. Now, I'm like, where y'all girls at?
As fewer women attend these venues, the overall atmosphere begins to decline. A higher concentration of men can make environments feel more intense, competitive, or uncomfortable, which in turn discourages even more women from going out.
This is how you know it's gonna be a bad vibe. When you scope the scenery and you say, dang, there's a lot of in here. There's a lot of men in here and not enough women. For every one woman, there's like 10 That ain't fun.
It creates a vicious cycle where the gender imbalance perpetuates itself, gradually hollowing out the social appeal of nightlife altogether. So if fewer people are going out, what does that mean for the businesses built around them? The fact is, nightlife and drinking venues are being forced to either adapt or disappear entirely. Across Western countries, bars, pubs and clubs share the same cost pressures, like higher rent, rising labor, energy, licensing and insurance costs, as well as alcohol taxes. This means that alcoholic beverages within venues are often 3 to 5 times more expensive per unit than retail drinks sold in supermarkets, convenience and liquor stores. For most establishments, alcohol isn't just a product, it's the primary source of revenue. This reliance makes rising drink prices particularly damaging, as even small shifts in consumption can have a disproportionate impact on overall profit, and we're already seeing the consequences. Alcohol has gone from being a cheap social lubricant to somewhat of a luxury item for people of all ages. And in response, a pre-drink economy has emerged beyond just younger drinkers, redirecting the bulk of alcohol consumption away from nightlife venues and into private homes, as people attempt to offset rising costs. As a result, customers are arriving to venues later, causing clubs to lose hours worth of revenue while still having to pay security and staff for the full shift. But these impacts aren't confined to just nightclubs either. The uptake in home drinking habits has caused pubs and bars to see a significant decline in overall customers, as individuals are far less inclined to spontaneously head out for a drink. Furthermore, The worldwide transition to hybrid or fully remote work results in far fewer people heading to a pub or bar after office hours, removing what was once a reliable stream of weekday customers. City centre venues that were once packed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays are now empty. Fewer alcohol sales has also caused a massive divide between pubs that serve food and those who don't. To survive in 2026, a pub almost has to be a restaurant to offset lost alcohol revenue or risk facing financial collapse. All of these factors combined are placing sustained pressure on revenue across the entire sector, as we witnessed over 75,000 jobs being wiped out across the UK nighttime economy between the last 2 years. So if the old version of nightlife is dying, what comes next? We're now witnessing the fragmentation of nightlife into something new, where the traditional dark room, loud music, and expensive drinks model is no longer the primary draw. Instead, the industry is being pulled in multiple directions at once, with one of the clearest shifts being the death of spontaneity. Nightlife used to be unpredictable. You'd show up, discover new music, meet new people, and leave the rest to chance. Now, every venue and event is pre-planned and pre-vetted, almost always judged before you even arrive. And if a venue isn't aesthetic enough for social media, or doesn't clearly communicate its exact vibe online, some younger audiences are simply less likely to go. But here's the nuance. Gen Z isn't cheap, they're just more selective. Spending per person among the generation is actually rising, with people willing to pay more, but only for the right experience. For many, the appetite for nightlife is still there, provided the occasion feels worth it. Gen Z prioritize clear lineups, artists they care about, and seamless mobile bookings. Social media also plays a huge role, as most strongly prefer high production and visually appealing events. In fact, around 30% of Gen Zs are more likely to film themselves at the event, rather than the artist performing. The environment has become part of the product, creating a reinforcing mechanism where venues prioritize visual appeal and branding over music, community, and the overall partying experience. At the same time, the hours are changing. The rise in popularity of daytime festivals and events show that people still want to socialize, just not at 3 a.m. The amount of events which start in the afternoon and end by 10 p.m. are growing rapidly, driven by customers who don't want to sacrifice their sleep, their routine, or their entire next day. This ties directly into the sober curious movement, where many are actively seeking low alcohol or completely alcohol-free experiences. But for venues who are still relying on high-margin alcohol sales, this isn't just a change in habits, it's an existential threat to their bottom line. And what's rising in response is a different kind of third space altogether. Instead of bars and dance floors, people are meeting through activity-based gatherings, things like run clubs, group dinners, or social experiences built around shared interests. These environments are lower pressure, more controlled, while also feeling safer and more intentional than traditional nightlife. Yet, for those who still enjoy recreational drinking and social indulgence, an uprising of theme bars and experience-centered venues are capturing the market that legacy establishments lost. These are led by the likes of axe throwing and arcade bars, places people can optionally drink or just enjoy the activity with friends. But make no mistake, nightlife isn't vanishing completely. It's just evolving into something more aligned with how people live today. However, in this shift, something important is being lost. The randomness, the unpredictability, and unfiltered human connection that make traditional nightlife feel like an organic experience rather than a curated itinerary. Because when every interaction is planned, optimized, and filmed for social media, you don't just lose the old nightlife, it becomes something else entirely.